Okay, hello. Welcome to the live stream. April 19th, 2017. And my name is Dana, if you're new here. So, welcome. And let's see. Okay, yep, for real, we are live. So, yay for that. And let's see, it'll take a second here for some people to hop on. Hello! Dragana is here. Larry, hello. Oh my gosh, a bunch of people. Jennifer and Brittany and Julie and Jerry and Christine and hey, Lucy and NC and SC and awesome Christina and Lou and Document Tube. Welcome. Welcome. Yeah, right? Oh my gosh, you remembered. Oh, awesome Christina. You are super awesome. She says, happy 2-year anniversary. Thank you so much for everything you do. Yes, today is my YouTube birthday. So, yay me. 2 years, if you can believe it. It feels like it's been 5. So, it has just been a really rocky 2 years full of a ton of learning curves. So, yeah, okay, Document Tube, that is you. Who was trash talking Michigan last time I talked to you. Talking all about how great Los Angeles was. That was our conversation. And I was like, I don't think I can do LA. Because that's a totally different world. But welcome. So I would like to do a video, a year in review for the 2-year anniversary of this channel, which which I will work on this weekend. But I did decide, okay, so in all fairness, Document Tube, I was thinking about what you said, and I'm at this weird pivotal point with all of this that I feel like I kind of do need to start making some decisions about what I'm going to do. So part of me is thinking, so I'm basically, long story short, I decided I'm pretty much going to sell everything, and I am moving in with friends, and I think this next year might be me kind of couch hopping and seeing if I can do this full time and maybe even traveling around the US. Yeah. So I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. But in all fairness, that idea did come to me after a few beers. So at the time it sounded amazing. But in all seriousness, I really am selling pretty much everything, and then we'll go from there. So welcome. Peace Pom Pom. I saw Ryan is here. Brittany. Sergio, JMB, Paul says, he's like, I have a 4-bedroom house in LA. You always have a place here. That's super awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, part of me is kind of thinking like, maybe I just take the next year off and I just kind of vlog about all of this. I didn't know you were in Texas, Lucy. That's cool. I might actually be in Texas in a few months. We should touch base. So, okay, so what is going on? Have you guys heard, actually, before we get into that, have you heard about this whole scandal with the whole Daddy of 5 channel? Did you hear about this? This, like, worst parents ever. They've been doing these pranks on their children, this one child in particular, and they're awful. Like they're not even funny. And the parents are just complete, I don't know, it's just awful, awful. But I think as of 20 minutes ago, they took all the videos down. Yeah, Ryan and I were talking about that. Right, it was so funny. Ryan was texting, we were texting the other night, and he's like, so what have you been up to? And I was like, it was 3 a.m. I'm like, I am reporting all of this guy's videos. Like, because I was so upset. These people, how they had a YouTube channel, how they were able to keep it monetized is beyond me. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Yeah, like beyond emotionally abusive. Yeah, I don't even know if their channel is still on YouTube for you to see it. It's just, like, I was so riled up over the weekend. And then Ryan is so calm. And then he's trying to calm me down. And I'm like, no, Ryan, seriously, like, you need to go check this out. And then he did. And then he got all riled up. And for Ryan to get riled up kind of takes a lot because he's so just even keel. So it was pretty wild. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was what Stockholm syndrome looks like in motion was these kids. Ridiculous. Hey, Jenny. Yeah, Little Miss was saying the daddy of 5 parents actually had their kids saying that they were not abused. Like that makes things okay. Well, not only that, but like their children would know. It's one of those things like the last thing the fish notices is the water. So if you grow up in an abusive home and you have abusive parents like that, then, and especially this one child who's young, I mean, he's probably like 8, if even that. If And he even said in half these videos, stop doing this to me. Like, I just need to go away, stop, this isn't funny. And the parents and the rest of the kids just kept targeting him. And they kept saying, like, oh, you can't take a joke. Everybody here thinks it's funny except for you. And all of this like shaming and blaming and grinding down and just awful, awful. And just like no accountability, no accountability. There's been another YouTuber, big YouTuber, his name is Philip DeFranco, and he was doing a series of videos. That's how I heard about this. And he was doing a series of videos on this family and does a great job of kind of like a wrap up of what has been going on, why their videos are problematic, why their behavior is problematic. And so in a way, I was really glad that he was able to bring this to the mainstream and to bring attention to this and pinpoint like why this is problematic. Because it's so tragic that not only these kids are seeing this channel had like 795,000 subscribers. So it's one thing to be an absolutely awful parent, but then what is the explanation for the other 795,000 of y'all? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's their excuse? Because this is not even funny. Like, the videos aren't even funny. They're just flat out mean. Just bullying. Not cool. So that's my tangent. But I think the situation has been handled, which is good. Adela says, I don't know if you'll see this question. I wanted to ask, is it for an empath possible to react in a very unempathetic way if he or she is in pain? That is what happens to me in recent times. Yes. So my guess is, well, everybody has their breaking point, okay? And oftentimes, because we are very empathic people, we forgive, we give second chances and 20-second chances, and we're continually trying to work towards a solution, and we tend to believe in the highest and greatest good in the world and in other people. And so we're very empathetic towards other people, but we really struggle with being empathetic towards ourselves and knowing when we're in harm's way and knowing when things are problematic for us and then taking appropriate action. We kind of put everybody else first and ourselves last. So when a person has that kind of personality, then they continue to get pushed because people that struggle with having solid boundaries tend to, odds are you have a wide mix of people in your life. And if you're not getting the right or the wrong people out of your life, then they're going to cause tremendous amounts of damage generally until we snap and we're like, I can't handle this anymore. We flip out. So and there's a term for this. It's called reactive abuse. And it's where it's sort of like if you visualize a child, right, who's getting bullied. And then one day the kid snaps and then hits the bully back or just goes bananas in school. That tends to be reactive abuse because they've put up with it so long that everybody has their breaking point. So for a lot of empaths especially, they really struggle with this and they think, oh my goodness, I've changed. What does this mean about me? How can, am I equally as to blame? I get that one a lot. Like, well, yes, my partner or my mother or whoever was totally abusive, but then, or they cheated and they lied and they stole, but then, well, I ended up cheating and I ended up lying and then I did all these things. And my question I always encourage people to kind of ask themselves is, what you were doing, was it in response to them? Because what I see a lot of too is people trying to kind of settle the score in a more roundabout kind of passive aggressive way. So you've got this partner who's cheating or abusing or lying or all of the above, and then they get pushed so far, but because they don't want to leave, or they keep getting roped back in and they keep thinking this person's going to change, all of this resentment's building and building and building. And then it starts coming out. It starts like seeping out of every single pore. So it's very common for people who have been controlled and micromanaged and abused and exploited and neglected and all of these things to then start lashing out, or to then take on kind of alternate maladaptive coping methods like drinking, drugs, all kinds of things. So yeah, it's very, very common. Yeah, and it takes a while for yes, that's Truth Seeker. That's such an appropriate example. She says the Ralphie syndrome, like the kid in A Christmas Story when he snaps and beats the bully down, exactly like that. And so, because in the Christmas Story, like, right, Ralphie totally goes bananas on him, and his response is way over the top for that one specific instance. But if you look at all of the instances piled up, that was him snapping. And this is one of the reasons they call people like this crazy makers, because it does drive a person to the point where they become so crazed and they feel so crazy, and because you're continually being invalidated and minimized and ridiculed, and especially if a person's not aware of like covert abuse and they can't quite pinpoint it, but it's all of these subtle put downs, all of these subtle digs, all of these, there's like kernels of truth, but then they're surrounded in a big ball of a lie, where it's hard to really see, is it me or is it them? And that stuff builds up. It builds up over a period of time, and it grinds a person down over a long period of time too. Yeah. Amanda says, I just got out of treatment and now I'm doing no contact. I'm proud of myself. It was something I wasn't able to do while I was drinking. I think that's fantastic. Congratulations. What? Two very huge victories. So yay you for that. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's awesome. And I can only imagine. I've never struggled with a drinking problem, but I can only imagine how hard it would be. It's hard. It's hard to deal with life sober, and it's hard to deal with all of the aftermath and the crazy making that these people, the damage that's left behind. So that's a huge, huge victory for you. Yeah. Okay, so let me scroll up. Shara asks, what kind of things will a women's shelter help you with if you go in and ask for help with an exit plan? Okay, that's a great question. And it depends on the shelter. So different shelters have different amounts of funding. They have different resources available. They have a lot of different things. Generally, a safety plan involves, there's like some common elements in a safety plan. So kind of getting duplicates of everything, especially important papers, keys, making sure that you have medications, kind of packing a go bag. So if you have a baby, let's say, for example, make sure that you have extra formula, diapers, ideally some money put aside, copies of like your insurance papers, birth certificates, social security cards, these kinds of things. It depends on a person's situation. So in some people, it can be really tricky to leave. I mean, I've worked with women that, they had a tense relationship with their abusive partner, but it was still somewhat workable. And then I've worked with women that have been on the extreme end of that, and they were terrified for their life. And our shelter, this one woman didn't even trust us. And so it was so tragic. So the shelter bought her 2 tickets out of town, going in 2 different directions. It was a Greyhound bus going in 2 different directions. We didn't even know which one she was going to get on. And so we gave her both tickets, and it was up to her. There were a few gals in extreme situations. A person can change their name. They can even change their social security number. I don't know if that's not really that common of a practice or even common knowledge, but it does happen. So it really just depends. And of course, packing a go bag, doing an exit plan, that can be great, and that can give a person a sense of hope. Like this is a plan. Like it might be plan A or B or C or D. But if a person's at a place where they're like, you know what, I'm really in danger, all of that stuff can be figured out. It's amazing. Like you can order a copy of your birth certificate, of your social security card. Money frankly doesn't matter. Stuff does not matter. All of that stuff can be replaced. There's oftentimes, there's a lot of churches out there that help people with like temporary housing or with money or with food or diapers, these kinds of things. So it's amazing people that can come together to help a person leave. I have on my channel a copy of how to do, or some things to take into consideration when doing a safety plan. So if you go to my website, thriveafterabuse.com, you should be able to see that. And it'll at least give you some things to think about. If you're finding the process overwhelming, which very understandable, another thought might be to join a handful of support groups. And if you're at all concerned about safety, I always recommend joining a support group under a fake name. So that way especially if it's on Facebook, so that way your personal profile is not tied back to your account. So if you're doing that, asking people there, what do they recommend? And yes, that's a good point. Dragana says, I had 6 different exit plans and told no one everything. Yes. And that's a good plan, because to not tell other people, because sometimes even well-intended people, if they're not really familiar with highly manipulative people, they can be manipulated. We had this even at the shelter. So we would have people calling. So here we were, our training was on women as victims and men as abusers. It was a domestic, kind of like your stereotypical domestic violence shelter. And so everybody was on alert for problematic men. We weren't necessarily on the lookout for problematic women. And so I remember one time a gal called, and she was talking to a coworker of mine who wanted to know if this gal that I was telling you about that on the Greyhound bus, if she was there. And she was saying, she's like, I am her mother. I'm really concerned about her. I just want to know that she's okay. And like, we don't know, and my coworker began, she said something like, I hadn't seen her in a few days, something that kind of like was saying like, yeah, she'd been here. But then she very quickly backtracked, because I kind of like looked at her like, what are you doing? She very quickly backtracked and was like, you know what? I can't confirm or deny that she's here, because that was our official response, unless they were on their contact list. But it was one of those things like, my coworker was a mother, and I think instantly she just thought, I would want to know where my daughter is too, and not thinking, we don't know who this woman is. Maybe she's this guy's mother. Maybe she's this guy's girlfriend. Like, we don't know. So, it's, they can manipulate. So it's a good idea to not have to really be careful with who you're telling what's going on. Okay. Yes, thank you. And Jean says they can aid you in getting a protective order and get you an advocate to navigate the court system. Yep, that's one of them. And two, I think if you're planning on leaving, it can really help, because highly abusive and manipulative people can do a really great job of playing the role of the victim. And especially for the men out there. I mean, this is something that men really need to be kind of have on their radar, because I think there's kind of this social bias that mothers can't be abusive, that women in general can't be abusive. And so that's the added challenge that men have when they're trying to leave an abusive relationship, especially if there's children involved. So kind of planning ahead for this, documenting as much as you possibly can, because male or female abusive people can do a great job of charming the court. They can come across as very convincing. So, keeping as much documentation as possible, and really trying to keep your cool as much as possible, because realize that they're probably going to be doing the same thing. So whatever you're saying, think about it in terms of especially whatever I'm putting in writing, I need to be able to go to court and defend this. Because the odds of them doing things to provoke you or to bait you into a reaction and then having you explode and then saying to the court or the police or whoever, see, look at my former partner. Look at how unpredictable they are. So this is what I have to put up with. And here you are, like, you've been provoked to the point where you explode. So one of the biggest things that we can do is to prepare ourselves for that kind of stuff. So where it doesn't catch you off guard. And it's hard. It's really difficult, but it can be done. Okay. Yeah, Sunny was saying, I hope shelters are better than they were 15 years ago. I wasn't treated very well then. There's so much education that still needs to happen, just with abuse in general, and even at the level of domestic violence shelters. It's been really cool. I mean, this is the power of the internet, right? Like, it's so cool. So every week I hear from people that are either that their therapist has recommended this channel, or that they heard about this through a domestic violence shelter or what have you. And it's so encouraging and inspiring, because it's the community of survivors that's what's so helpful. That's what's so validating, and it gives a person so much clarity. And that was kind of my, not my goal for the channel. I had no expectations when I started this channel, but that's what the goal is now. Because that's where the magic happens, is having a bunch of people that have been there, done that, connecting with other people that are going through it. So I think what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years is things are going to be very radically different. And I would really like to be able to, in the future, go back through and remake all of my red flag video series, and somehow be able to get that out to different domestic violence shelters and such. That's one of my things. I was thinking the other night that it would be fun every year for me to make a vision board for kind of what I want for this next year. So I shared my vision board last year, and so I don't know, maybe I'll work on that like this weekend. Like what I want to have happen. I know that I want to interview Tina Turner. Like that's going to be front and center on my vision board. So, okay, Shannon says, "Hi Dana, so happy to see a live video from you. Well, welcome. Welcome. Yeah, I realize a lot of people, the timing of this, it's either in the middle of the night for them or they have to work or something else. So it's always fun to see new faces on here. Jean says, there are very good support services for men who have been abused, as 30 years ago, not so much. There's still a ways to go for both, especially for men. Who was I talking to? There was a situation, I don't even remember what the context was. Oh, just the other day. With men, there's so much more. There's still a long ways to go as far as outreach goes, especially with kind of sexual assault in men. And it's this, this whole idea that, men always want sex. And, and then you hear stories of, a guy losing his virginity when he's 10 to his babysitter who's like 24, which, that's not consensual. And it's rape, molestation, like that's not okay. And just I could go on and on. So yeah, there's just lots of outreach stuff that needs to go on. Marcy is talking about her daughter. So Marcy, I'm not sure if you're in the group or not. If I feel like you are, but if you're not, please, I strongly consider joining. And this is the other added challenge that's not discussed either, is family, friends, loved ones of people that are in an abusive relationship, the emotional toll that it takes on them, and the fear and the anxiety, and they go through that emotional roller coaster too of trying to get this person to safety and trying to get them away from the clutches of this abusive person. And it's intense. It's intense for them, and that's putting it lightly. So, yeah, a document tube is saying LA has no therapy for this. Really, it's not out there in general. It's not LA. It's not, I get this a lot of times too. And people say, oh, Germany doesn't have this kind of education, or, Croatia doesn't have this. And it's like, no, this is everywhere. And this is like cutting edge stuff. The stuff that I learned when I was working at a domestic violence shelter, the education that I had there pales in comparison to what I learned when I was in a support group. And so, here I was, if you're familiar at all with my story, here I was working at a domestic violence shelter and thinking that I was in this amazing relationship, and kind of long story short, I was teaching this stuff at a domestic violence shelter. And then next thing I knew, I found myself in, well, that ended up being a potentially deadly relationship. And then I was in one a few years later. that was another bad relationship, abusive relationship. So, and I really felt like I should have seen this coming, and why didn't I? And what signs was I missing? And how can I prevent this from happening again? And there was just all of this confusion and shame. And it wasn't until I had been in therapy and I was doing all these things, but I'm like, I still, like, it's not clicking. I just don't know. I don't get it. I'm missing some pieces here. And then getting into a support group, and then everything made sense. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and this document tube is saying, my friends and family have deserted me. They think I'm making this stuff up. I'm not, it's fact. And very, very common, because this kind of stuff is so over the top that people, they don't even understand it. Because it's just like, does this really even happen? I remember thinking, in my situation, I was like, this is like a Lifetime TV movie. Like, this can't possibly be real. Like, this doesn't really happen to people. But it does. And actually, it happens a lot. It's that people just don't discuss it. So, okay, Truth Seeker, excuse me, Elise says, people say they don't trust women, but I can't seem to find trustworthy men either. And then Care Bear was saying, I don't trust myself in dating anymore. So let's talk about trust for a little bit here. There are trustworthy people out there, but if you figure it this way, okay, let's just say, we're just going to kind of go probably maybe high, 10%. Let's just say 10% of the population is dangerous and destructive. It might even be a little bit more than that. Let's just say 20. We'll say 25. For the sake of round math, 25% of the population is dangerous and destructive of some way, shape, or form, okay? And then the other 75%, the normal people. The challenge with that is trying to figure out, okay, well, which 25% is dangerous and destructive? So the only way to tell is giving it time and paying attention to actions, consistent actions over a consistent period of time. Time will tell you everything that you need to know. And I think, unfortunately, when people are in, hold on a second, are in an abusive situation, they leave that and they have nothing. They're generally, they have no money, they have no friends, they have no family. They have no self-esteem. They're just starting at ground zero, and they're scared and they're lonely, and they don't know who to trust, and their judgment is really skewed, and they might not even realize it. And so it's very, very common for a person to have a pattern of getting into abusive relationships after that first one, and that's why. So I encourage people to realize that your radar, you've gotten tangled up with a highly manipulative person. It's normal to come out of a situation like that and to feel like you've been lost in a fog, to kind of wind up, you're like, I don't know where I am. I'm not sure what happened. I'm not even quite sure who I am. You're going to be really mixed up, and that's very normal for that. So how to kind of work on that is to just realize that, and then to take things slowly. And it helps to really practice meeting new people in safe environments when there's not a heavy emotional expectation there. So not dating. So like meetup.com, I'm a huge fan of that website, and that's why. So it can be really a great, safe way to just join a few groups, to explore, and then people watch and pay attention to your emotions during this time. How are you feeling? Like, do you feel that, does this person, and to try to not judge your emotions either, because that can be really difficult to do. But like, to just kind of observe, how are you feeling in all of this? And, to go slow and be like, okay, I really like this person, and I'm not so wild about that person, or this person seems nice, but they're not really kind of like my people. And then to slowly move forward. What happens, again, with a lot of people that go through abusive situations is that they're really starved out and they're really scared. And so those two things, being starved out and being scared, creates a scramble. And this is just a human being thing. It's not like a you thing or a me thing. It's a human being thing. So when a person's in a scramble, they're not making solid decisions, and they tend to jump into anything. They tend to get caught up in that whirlwind situation. And because that whirlwind situation not only doesn't feel problematic, it feels healthy. And it can be really hard to leave that whirlwind situation, because it's like, oh, thank goodness I finally found this amazing person who's going to be a really good friend or a really good partner. And then things kick up speed, and then next thing they know, that's that love bombing, that level of intensity, and they're confusing that intensity with sincerity, because the only way to tell the difference between these two is time. But if it's a whirlwind situation, then it happens quickly. So you don't have that ability to kind of keep that emotional distance and let things play out. So, okay, let me. AJ was saying, hi Dana, I had family court with my ex. He refused to respond to my statement. He got flippant with the judge and stormed out. He applied for access. Is he cracking under pressure? Is this a narcissistic injury or narcissistic rage? So both, it sounds like, and that's good. That's good that he got flippant, and it's good that he stormed out so the judge can see his actions for what they are. And that's really an ideal situation where it's not a he said, she said thing. It's sort of like, please let his behavior or her behavior just speak for itself. Like, that's really the best case scenario. So narcissistic injuries tend to trigger narcissistic rage. And so narcissistic injury, if you think of it like an ego injury. So if a person takes some sort of affront to something, like, and with narcissistic people, it's this idea of, how dare you question me, challenge me, side against me, do anything that I don't like you to do. Like, how dare you? Who do you think you are? So it's this like overinflated ego that triggers that narcissistic injury. And then because it's all about power and control of, oh, wait a minute, now they're losing power and control and you're getting it, right? Because you're setting boundaries, or you're somehow saying no. So then that triggers that rage of, they storm out, or they become dangerous, or you get death threats, or they key your car, or they do whatever that they're doing that ends up in rage. Shara says, I have never talked about my abusive relationship to anyone. I never knew it was abusive. Yeah. You're so not alone in that. Most people, I think the vast majority of people that are in an abusive relationship don't realize that they're in one. And the reason being is we all have this idea of what an abusive relationship is and what it looks like. And a lot of that has to do with media, right? So the images that we see, this is kind of the unintended consequence of a lot of the imagery and the information that is being circulated. I think it comes from a good place. This is why I'm saying it's an unintended consequence. So a lot of the information that's circulated, it talks about abusive relationships with, there's like an image of a really mean looking guy and a woman huddled in the corner with a black eye, or she's really badly beaten. And then there's like a caption at the bottom, right? Something like, I don't know, some sort of caption. But if a person's reality doesn't match that image that they're used to seeing, because for so many people, this idea of an abusive relationship is, and only is, a physically abusive relationship, then they don't connect what's happening to them. So, until it gets really bad, even if it is physical, because especially if a person wants to stay. So they might be telling themselves, well, yes, he shoved me, but he didn't hit me. Or maybe he hit me, but he only hits me when he's drinking. Or maybe he hits me and it's only when he's drinking, but it's never in the face. And okay, well, maybe he hits me and it's only when he's drinking and it is in the face, but he's never broken a bone. And so people keep moving that line of, they think if I can still handle it, then it's not a problem. And that's problematic thinking, because that line keeps getting moved and moved and moved until a person has that like rock bottom moment where somebody says, you need to leave, or you're going to leave, or you're not going to leave. Like you're going to leave in a body bag. So, but that's extreme. And most abusive relationships don't get to the place where they have physical abuse. Physical abuse is a late stage of other types of abuse. So physical abuse, the vast majority of the time, is preceded by verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual, financial, spiritual abuse. So very, very common. Very common. Okay, Adela says, considering trust, I'm starting at ground zero. I just began to recover, having experienced the horror of narcissistic abuse. I couldn't pay attention to my boundaries. A man forced his private phone number onto me. So, and that's okay. And I know that is scary. Hold on. Do we have a troll? I didn't even see him. Oh, Jonathan. Wait, do we have two? Okay, hold on. I don't normally have to ban people on here. Okay, there we go. Let's see, I don't know, but Lucy, you are now a moderator, yay! And then Diana, let's see, let's put you as one. Lucy says, give me a wrench, Dana. So, I don't even know what he said. Gosh. If he was crass and rude to you guys, I'm sorry. I'm used to it. It just doesn't faze me anymore. Hey, Bear's here. Okay, Adela says, it was a public interaction in a professional situation. He wasn't supposed to give me his private number. I totally understand that feeling of like, wow, this person really crossed a major boundary. I thought this was like a safe environment, and now I feel violated, and how awful of a feeling that can be. So, this is a good, but okay, so let's focus on like what worked with that, okay? The victory in that is that you realize that's not okay with you, and that's not something that you want in your life. Because the reality is that people like that are, they're going to go down the line, and then they're going to just kind of knock on all of these doors for all of these different women or men or whoever, and see who is this going to work on. And it didn't work on you. So that was a small win. And unfortunately, it came at a time that you were really, vulnerable and emotionally raw, but good for you. Like, you realize this is not for me. This is not what I want. Yes. Lamia? I am sorry for that. I don't know what all went down in here, but she says maybe my name hurt his feelings. Maybe it did. Maybe he just couldn't handle the awesomeness of your name. We're going to go with that. We're going to go with that because you have an awesome name. So haters keep on hating. Yeah, Jonathan, or Document Tube was talking about thick skin. Yeah, he says it's YouTube. It happens all day. Thick skin, Dana. Yep. And I have learned with all of this that it's not really even thick skin, it's scar tissue. And it develops one little cut and jab and poke at a time. So that's the past 2 years has been me really developing that thick skin and that scar tissue. And it's been a really challenging process, but I it is what it is if you want to do this. So I didn't realize that then, but I realize it now. Rosario says, Dana, I used to be sad all the time. In one of your videos, you said you were in love with the person you thought they were. And that's all I needed to hear. That's when life changed. Thank you. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that was able to resonate with you so much. It's so funny how we can hear that, right? Like, and I think that's too, like the power of a support group is somebody might just say one thing and you're like, boom, game changer. Like that was it. That was exactly what I needed to hear. I have the clarity that I need, and now I can move forward. So I'm glad that I was able to give you that. That's awesome. So okay, let me scroll up. This chat goes so quickly. Oh yeah, Elise says, I can spot narcs more easily now, but it's difficult with people I've known for a long time and I'm too emotionally involved in. Oh, it is. It is. When we're emotionally involved in any situation, especially if it's with another person, it's really hard to see the reality of it, especially when we're wishing it was different than what it was. That's where confusion stems from. Confusion is kind of knowing the truth but wishing it was different. So this is why we get confused when we might put pants on and then all of a sudden they're really snug and we're like, oh no, and then we justify it. They must have shrunk in the dryer, or it's because it's wintertime, or all these other excuses when in fact, actually no, we've gained 5 pounds, right? Or look at other examples when people got tangled up with Bernie Madoff or other, scam artists. It starts off, these amazing promises or this good time with this person, and then things start to get confusing. Things start to get weird. And the people that got tangled up in it, they weren't stupid. Most people aren't. Actually, it's the opposite. People that tend to get and stay involved in abusive dynamics of any kind, with a cult leader, with a con artist, with a financial con artist like the Bernie Madoffs of the world, these kinds of things. It's oftentimes really intelligent people, engineers, doctors, lawyers, people that tend to do a lot of thinking. And the downside to being an intelligent person is you can rationalize almost anything. And that's what a lot of it was going on, is they saw that it was squirrely, but they wished it wasn't. And so it's a human thing. It's not it's not like not necessarily even an intelligence thing. It's when the human brain wants something to be other than it is, it's going to continue to rationalize what it's seeing. And so, geez. I got him. I don't know what that's about. There's people just coming on saying a bunch of ugly stuff. We don't need that here. Don't be ugly. Go away. And trolls, I just want you to know I'm sending you light and love, but from behind a closed door. So this stuff's not welcome here. Okay, so Adela says, one major question I'm ashamed to ask. Why is that? The more empathy I feel for the abuser, the less positive feelings I have got left for healthy people. Is that the trauma that kicks in there? Well, that's a good question. My guess would be is if you're kind of giving and giving and giving and giving all of this kind of, in many ways, like misplaced empathy for this abusive person, and then there's not a lot of it's almost like compassion fatigue. You get to this place where you're giving and giving and giving, but then you don't have anything to give to other people. Because this one person, this is also why that, kind of other names for abusive people, energy vampires, emotional vampires, these kinds of things. That's why, because they just drain and drain and drain and drain. Even if they're not so much even a part of a person's life, it's the rehashing and the ruminating and it takes a while to kind of detox from a person like that that's just draining your energy. So I think that's really a lot of what it is it's just compassion fatigue and kind of this misplaced empathy. We can only give so much. Yeah, Vivian is saying, yes, it's that one person that really drains you and there's nothing left over for others. Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second too. And all of these, some feelings, some common experiences when you're giving too much, to learn to turn inward. What does it feel like when you're giving too much? Oftentimes it feels like resentment. It feels like irritation. It feels like anger. It feels like anxiety and depression. And then it starts manifesting in physical ways. So some of these early warning signs are emotional things. These are signs you're out of alignment. Something's got to give. When you're in alignment, you feel calm, you feel peaceful, you are able to kind of enjoy other things. Like you don't have like a thorn stuck in your paw, like you're not thinking and rehashing and ruminating and you're not fixated on this one thing. You're thinking about the weather or kind of what you're going to have for dinner or, your next vacation or, how that person jogging by is in really good shape and good for them. like these are the things that you're thinking about. So you're not stewing about something. So if you're stewing about something, you're rehashing, you're ruminating, these are all signs that some sort of boundary has been violated and that some action needs to be taken in order to get you back into alignment. Further down the road, if you've been out of alignment for any length of time, that's when you start noticing it's weight changes. Either you've lost a bunch of weight or you've gained a bunch, generally more than 10 pounds. If you've gained more than 10 or lost more than 10 pounds and you can't explain it, there's something going on there. If you're sleeping, consistently more than like 8 or 9 hours a night, or you're sleeping less than like 7 or 8 hours a night consistently, something's off there. If you're having a lot of inflammation, if you're having a lot of pain, I think really a lot of these diseases and disorders that people have, a lot of times the core of it is it's stress induced. Lupus, Crohn's, fibromyalgia. And not to say that it's only caused by this, but stress really makes things a lot worse. So there's kind of this ongoing joke, like joking but not joking kind of a thing in support groups where you'll hear people talk about, before you get on medication for thinking that you're like bipolar or that you're depressed or that you're anxious, first make sure that you don't have an abusive person in your life. because oftentimes that's what it is. And when people are having these intense mood swings of like really up, really down, they're finding themselves drinking or using drugs or acting in ways that's not consistent with who they are. These are all oftentimes coping mechanisms as to what's going on. So I heard a great breakdown the other day of the word addiction, and I love words. I'm always looking up like what is the root of this word. It's just so interesting to think about where our language kind of comes from and how things go together. So the word addiction, if you break it apart, like ad, and then diction, and diction meaning like to communicate, right? Like to dictate, to communicate, and then ad meaning like an addition of. If you put it together, addiction is another way of communicating. And I thought that was really powerful because that's exactly what it is. And so if a person's feeling blocked or that they're unable to talk about certain issues, then it's very common for them to kind of substitute their communication, their lack of verbal or emotional communication, with food, with alcohol, with some sort of other substance, with money, with all of these things. And interesting. So, and somebody had, yes, okay. Ben is saying, this is so true, Dana. I went through a 40-pound gain and loss on my weight. Here is something else about weight. I don't know if I mentioned this last time or not, but I think this is, I just get so interested in random stuff. So I'm sorry if I'm boring you guys with this, but when a person is stressed, your body releases cortisol. This is like the stress hormone. And the stress hormone and, cortisol, it makes you gain weight. It kind of puts the body into kind of like defense. It's like a defense mode, right? Like against the attacker. So the person's going to gain weight. It's almost like armor, like it's protection. When the body's chemically like out of whack, it's going to signal to us to take certain actions to get different chemicals to kind of balance things out. And so one of the balances to cortisol is serotonin. And what's interesting is serotonin, high carb, high fat food releases serotonin in the body. And so when you find yourself craving like quote unquote comfort food, it literally is comfort food. It's releasing that serotonin into your body. And so I think, at least for me, I found that it's really interesting. So if I'm craving ice cream, that's kind of my go-to. Like if I'm craving ice cream, to think about, am I really craving ice cream or am I stressed out? It's interesting to kind of slow things down and to see, like, no, I really want ice cream. Or, no, actually, I am good. That's weird that I'm even craving that. I'm not even hungry. And then I can pass. But realizing that there's so many forces behind the scenes. But if we're not aware of that, if we're thinking that our logical and rational brain is the only part of our brain, then we're going to get so frustrated with ourselves. We're going to be like, oh man, I lack willpower, I lack discipline, I'm lazy, I'm unmotivated, what is my problem? And we get so hard on ourselves. But really it's like, no, actually there's kind of a deeper chemical imbalance that's going on that your body's going to start screaming the more it's not regulated. It's sort of like if you go to the grocery store and you haven't eaten in 12 hours, you're going to shop for very different food than if you've had a snack, even like if you've had 2 crackers before you go. Like your body's just going to scream for different types of food. It's really wild. So something to keep in mind, paying attention to what your cravings are. Evett says, how long did it take for you to build up your trust again? So, Oh, it took me quite a while, although I think it would have happened a lot faster had I known, I didn't know what I went through. And so like I fumbled around in the dark for years. So it wasn't until it kind of I just kept getting tangled up with like the wrong people, the wrong situations. I just didn't know what was wrong. I didn't have I just didn't have the clarity. And for me, the missing piece was getting into a support group and hearing from other people. And so like once I did that, then I realized, then it was this whole kind of new, series of aha moments that started. And then I realized, I don't know. So it was just kind of this, like, I had a pattern for a while there where I was picking like the wrong person after the wrong person after the wrong person with friends or with boyfriends. And a lot of it was I kept getting sucked in by the love bombing. So I like was confusing that level of intensity with sincerity. And my whole thing was, well, I know I have issues with trust and maybe with men. So, and then if a guy came across as like Mr. Amazing, I would tell myself, I don't want to ruin this. So even though I'm not really ready and he's the one that's setting the pace of all this, I guess I'm just going to kind of, like just stuff all of my hesitations and reservations back and then I'll just let him take the speed of the relationship, and because I have issues. So I was very quick to give away all of my power and control, thinking that I didn't want to mess up a good thing. And then of course it ended up not being a good thing. So how long did it take for me to regain trust? I think it's when I realized that was a problem, because I didn't see my part in things for a long time. I didn't realize that my radar was off. I didn't realize that I was confusing intensity with sincerity. So because I didn't see where I was going wrong, when I kept finding myself in these relationships, it felt like I was cursed. Because it's like, I feel like, I kept getting in hit and run accidents is what it felt like. And I just didn't see, how do I make this stop? So, and then so for a long time, I really thought, I really want to go back to the old me, which was moving very quickly with friends and with boyfriends, very, very quick, deep conversations, spending a lot of time together, this whole, and again, even with friends, like when there was nothing romantic involved, like this whole whirlwind thing where I was very quick to just be like, oh, this person's so interesting and intelligent and likable and amazing. And I was very quick to make them my whole world. And then I would get burned. And I didn't realize that it was also part of my approach. So that was a big aha for me, realizing I need to really slow things way down, and that trust is something that's earned. It's not blindly given. So my whole approach of, I really wish I was like the old me, where I could go running full speed into a situation, immediately trusting total strangers and believing in the highest and greatest good of other people. It took me a long time to realize that was problematic, because I just didn't think it was problematic, and it is. So that was a big thing, and that took a lot of practice to really slow down, getting burned enough times, being like, I have to maintain my power and control. I have to move things at a pace that I'm okay with moving at, and realize that if it's truly a good thing, it'll be there tomorrow. And it'll be there a month tomorrow, and it'll be there a year from tomorrow. Like, I don't have to move at a pace that I'm not comfortable with. And once I kind of got out of that scramble and was able to slow things down enough to just, there was so much freedom in that. Just being like, you know what? I could give that other person room to just be themselves. And I had no expectations. Whereas before it was, when you move that quick, it's like everybody kind of falls in love with everybody's, highest and best self. Like it's like your resume self. Like it's who shows up for a job interview self. And no, none of us are those people. Like that's our highest and greatest self that day. But that person's not there like 90 days from there. And when I slowed things down and I was totally comfortable enough with being like, I'm okay to leave. Like I'm totally okay. Like I really might like this person a lot, but if I start seeing stuff that feels like deal breaker stuff, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm okay with getting up and leaving. And so once I realized that it might be hard to get up and leave, that I needed to, that was when trusting myself happened. Because then I was able to trust myself enough to stay safe. Because other people, master manipulators are master manipulators. They do this day in and day out. So they're really, really good at it. And all any of us can do is all we can do. So we can go as slow as we're going to go. We can do all of these things, but a person might end up kind of playing the long game, right? Like Bernie Madoff. That might happen. And to realize all we can do is when we start seeing the signs of problematic behavior, then we can respond accordingly. And when you can prove to yourself that you can get yourself out of harm's way, that's when the trust in your judgment comes back. So, but great question. And David was saying, yes, serotonin is released in your brain and in your gut. And the feedback loop gives us nice feelings, not only in our head, but quite literally in our core. Yes, and that is another thing that's so super fascinating. So just real quick, there is this kind of talk that we have two brains, and scientists have found recently that in our stomach, and I think probably in our intestines as well, like in our digestive tract, and they didn't realize this before, that many of the chemicals they thought were previously only released in our brain are also released in our digestive tract. That's very, very interesting. So, and what David's talking about, this feedback loop, it's basically your vagus nerve, which goes from your brain stem pretty much down to your colon, and it touches all of your major organs in between. And so when you're getting those gut feelings, it's the mammal part of your brain, it's the emotional part of your brain that's trying to talk to you, it's trying to get your attention. The human body is so fascinating. Like, it's just amazing. So we have three brains. So we have our reptilian brain. It's the brain stem. It's kind of the core here. This is our fight or flight. This is our kind of a very instinctual brain. Then you have the emotional brain, the limbic system, which is actually the largest brain. And then you have the prefrontal cortex, which is the logic and the rational thinking brain. Us human beings tend to think that we are our rational brain. And because of this, I think it gets us into a lot of trouble, because we're very quick to, if we can't make logical sense out of them, we're very quick to come up with rationalizations. And so most people are not, myself included, like we all experience this. We think that we're very rational, reasonable creatures, but the reality is we're actually rationalizing creatures. And this is also too why it's so important to pay attention to your gut instinct. It's there for a reason. Your emotional brain, your limbic system, is picking up on keys in your environment, signals in your environment, that it's not filtering up to your logical, critical thinking brain. So this is why I always say, if it feels like something's off, odds are something's off. It's instinct. And human beings, it's the weirdest thing. We are probably the only animal, not just mammal, but like the only animal in general that is really out of alignment with our instincts. You don't see dogs or cats kind of like second guessing themselves. Like if something feels off, like the cat, right away, their hair stands up and they're hissing and they're baring their teeth and they're doing all of that. Like they react on instinct. Whereas we have this kind of this weird, this logical, critical thinking brain, which gets us into trouble a lot of times because, we rationalize things. So it's important. Pay attention. Little Miss says, what was the name of that abusive YouTuber? I don't know his... Mark, maybe? His channel was called Daddy of Five. It might be off the air. Which I hope so, because it was just beyond ridiculous and awful and awful. Jermaine says, Dana, do you think narcissistic abuse and PTSD is linked to people developing fibromyalgia? I'm sure I have developed it from all the trouble. I think there's a big correlation there. I think trauma is really at the root of a lot of things that we haven't even begun to, that modern medicine has not even begun to connect, frankly. So it comes out, that stuff comes out, it comes out in emotional ways, it comes out in a lot of physical ways. If we're not able to, for whatever reason, handle stress in our life, right? And we're like denying it, we're suppressing it, or we're being told by this abusive person, oh, this is not a problem. You're crazy. You're too emotional. You're too sensitive. You can't take a joke. If it's or that never happened, right? If our reality is continually minimized and invalidated, but a person deep down, they're like, no, something's really wrong, but they can't quite pinpoint what, because they're not being hit, or they're not being hit in the face, or they're not being hit in the face on a regular basis, then the odds are they're like trying to process this, but it's like your body's trying to get your attention and it's screaming at you. So there's a whole host of health issues that it can come up with. Oh, it can lower your immune system. It can cause, changes in your body, physical changes. It can definitely age a person. Yep. Boom. Lou Stevens drops mic. Yes, well said. Stress causes chronic cortisol, which increases and impairs the chronic cortisol impairs the immune system, and then the body has less defense to fight free radicals and other toxins, and that is how most autoimmune diseases occur. Yeah. Yep. Always Learning says, are there more narcissists today than 30 to 50 years ago due to lack of good parenting and bad examples on TV today versus in the 1950s or 60s? It's really hard to say, because it's one of those things, like now we know what's going on in the world. Whereas before, especially like in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, you really only knew what was going on in your town and really kind of in your like micro community. So with your neighbors, with people at your church, what on your block. And people weren't discussing a lot of this stuff either. So it's hard to say if it's, my guess is it's always kind of been there, probably to this degree and this frequency. It was just never discussed, or it was never really seen as such, would be my guess. I mean, really, frankly, the whole field of kind of psychology in general, therapy in general, if you look where that was, like, back in the 50s and 60s, and how much that has grown and changed. So it's a very new field of practice, and where it will be in 50 years, I mean, it's exciting, but where we are now, I really think that people are now just kind of on like the brink of even being close to understanding human behavior. I mean, modern medicine, it wasn't that long ago, women would get hysterectomies for being seen as like too emotional. That's where that word came from. Hysterectomy, hysteria. Like you were hysterical. Either they were maybe probably abused, or had like bipolar, maybe even schizophrenic, and their cure was, well, it's their female organs that are the problem, so we'll do a hysterectomy to make them less hysterical. Yikes. There's just all kinds of stuff that has been done to people in the name of mental health. Scary. Gosh, is this the same person that keeps coming back? Oh, the crazy angry codependent says, NPD, I call my family curse. My family tree is dripping with it. I got the codependency. Oh, I hear ya. I hear ya, sister. It was very eye-opening for me. Actually, let me see. I think this is it here. Hold on. I think. Yeah. So this was very eye-opening for me. So when I was going through everything with my first breakup, my mom flew out to come stay with me for like a month. I was a flipping wreck. I was such a wreck on so many different levels. And so she flew out to stay with me. And during that time, she gave me, my grandmother was a writer, and she gave me a book of hers that was never published. And I knew my grandfather, my grandmother had been married to a narcissist. And my grandfather, he was a minister, he was charming, he was a womanizer. I think there was talk of him also being a pedophile. Like he was something else. I mean, he drove his family into poverty. He was just awful on many, many different levels. And everything that my grandmother went through, I only knew part of her story, but my mom gave me her book. And so I hear you with the family curse thing. So this is her book. It's never been published. I might end up, I have not read the whole thing, but it's called, you can see it. That's her, way back when. She passed away quite a while ago, but the book is called From Divorce, Despair, and Delight by Mildred Morningstar. And it's how to get on course after divorce. And it was her experience with all of this. And I remember when my mom gave me that book, thinking, it totally felt like a family curse. Like, oh my gosh, my mom's been through this, I've been through this, my grandmother's been through this. Like, what is going on here? And yeah. And then kind of making the decision of like the buck stops with me. Like it ends now. And I need to figure this out. So I think this stuff is very prevalent in families, because a lot of it's just these kind of family systems and the patterns that we tend to repeat. And a lot of it's like what's considered normal. Or what people tend to do is let's say you have a person, let's say a guy has a very abusive mother, and he decides either one of two things. I am never going to date a woman like that, or I am going to, or there's a certain level of comfort in a really dominating, overbearing mother. So he tends to marry a very dominating, overbearing woman. If a guy decides to go the opposite way, then he is going to be primed for women that love bomb. So more of like those covert manipulators. And women too, right? But that's how that tends to go. So it's very normal. If a person is in a relationship with a highly abusive person, odds are their next relationship is going to be with somebody that's the exact opposite. But the polar opposite of problematic is still problematic. So if you're dating a person that's like that obvious, that obvious or overt abusive person. The opposite of that is going to be the covert or the more hidden abusive person. And that can really be disorienting because it's sort of like, well, okay, like, who do I stay away from? I can see I need to stay away from this guy or this gal at the party they're so full of themselves, they're just mean. I know to stay away from the snake in the road, but how do I spot the snake in the grass? And that can be very disorienting. And so what a lot of people tend to do is they tend to go back and forth. So then they have that overt abusive relationship, then they have the covert abusive relationship, and then they might go to another covert abusive relationship, or if they go back to that overt abusive relationship, generally it's because there's a certain level of comfort with, well, at least with this person I know what I'm getting. So I'd rather be with the snake in the road and know what I'm getting than risk getting involved with Prince Charming who ends up turning into like Prince Harming. Okay. Yes. Yes, Bear was saying, Dana, it's multi-generational. I ordered my father's military records. He was betrayed by everyone who should have loved and supported him. I lived it in my own life. The cycle can be broken. I agree. It's making the decision of, I need to get this figured out. This ends here. But so much of it is awareness. It's one of those things, like, if it's so hard. I think it's so hard for us to see where we're kind of going wrong with this, in part because odds are we've always kind of been this way. So if you've always been like a kind, good person who tends to think the good of everybody, and you give people multiple chances, and you're very quick to forgive, and you gloss over problems, and you believe in the best in people, to realize that some of that can be problematic. That's a hard thing to wrap a person's mind around. Like, it took, like I said, it took me a really long time to realize that. And I think it does for most people. So, and then trying to kind of navigate a new normal. Because then it's sort of like, well, wait a minute. Okay, maybe I have been too much of a softie for a long time. So I guess the opposite of that is being real bitchy. I remember being really upset. So kind of like the gal earlier who was talking about this guy had forced his phone number on her, and she was really upset by that. I had a similar situation at work where it was the security guard who, I tend to smile a lot and I talk to people, and he took all that the wrong way and then began coming on to me, and he's married. And so I was so angry and like disgusted by that. I mean, and like enraged on so many levels, because I work in a somewhat potentially dangerous place. And then I felt, I just was so inappropriate, because it's sort of like, well, now I don't feel comfortable calling security because now this guy's creeping me out, and I don't want to say anything, because if I am in danger, I need him to protect me, or to like respond at least. And now things are awkward. And I was so irritated by that. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know what to do. Like, what vibe was I giving off? Like, and I thought, well, I guess maybe I'll smile less. Like, maybe that's it. Or maybe I just don't, like, I didn't know how to set a healthy boundary. And so I was really thinking, like, okay, no. I just am going to avoid this guy, and I'm not going to make eye contact, and I'm not going to engage in conversation, and I'm not going to do all these things. But then I kind of realized, no, that's really messed up. I'm just going to be me. Like, maybe it's like that guy read everything wrong, and it's not me. And then I kind of got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to change who I am. And he was the one that crossed the line, like, not me. So I'm still going to smile. I'm still going to talk to people. Still going to be nice. Like, not going to change who I am. Somebody crosses that line, then they cross it, and then I'll kind of draw the line again and kind of get them back over there. So That's all any of us can do. Melody says, do narcissists have any idea of how much information has been released about them and their behavior and reaction, that there's names and definitions of these things? I would guess so. I mean, it's to some extent, because it's been a huge topic for, for a while now, especially with Donald Trump. And I don't even want to get anything political, but it brought narcissism to the forefront. So there's been that. There's been a lot of like popularity with that, and kind of with abuse, a lot of stuff is becoming a lot more mainstream. So in a way that it's good. It's good to have these conversations start. I mean, all we can do is make the best of it. Okay, let's see. And here's the thing too. So people then get concerned. They're like, well, Dana, what if like all of these abusive people, they're now aware, they know that we know, right? And oh no, they can't know that we know, because like then they're gonna level up. And at first I was concerned about that, but then I got to thinking about it. I'm like, no, I think kind of this is the whole evolution of it all. Like what's going to happen with them is what's going to happen with any problematic person is they're going to get wiser, then we're going to get wiser, and then they're going to get wiser, and then we are, and then they are, and then we are. And so it kind of, everybody starts leveling up. And I think the end result, how this is all going to play out, is it's going to really come back down to people paying attention and getting back in tune with who they are, with their intuition, with their instincts. Because the more in tune with that a person is, then the less they're going to get taken in. So it'll be interesting to see where everything kind of goes in like the next decade or so. I mean, you think about like online scammers. First there was like the Nigerian prince who had, misfortune had befallen him, and he had, $100 million, and he wanted to give you a percentage, right? And people were falling for this right and left. And then once they knew better, they did better. Well, then the scammers leveled up their game, and then people got wise to that. And then it kind of goes and goes and goes. And so now people have gotten to the point with online stuff where if it feels off, they're generally really hesitant to move forward with it, and they realize that it's off. Oh, totally. Lou, I agree completely. He says, I think a lot of this with narcissism and codependency is in the subconscious. Most of us aren't aware of what we have until our world is turned upside down. I agree completely. And that is kind of I don't want to minimize anybody or re-victimize anybody by saying this, but can kind of be, I think, the big, in a weird way, like the gift in this is when a person's life is totally blown apart, the benefit and the beauty of that is then you can then go about consciously putting it all back together again, piece by piece. So then you're living a life of intention, you're living a life of purpose on purpose, because you're examining every single piece, not just what the damage from this abusive person caused, but you're examining every piece. Like, okay, here's this concept of what I got from, I think, from my dad about like what a man is supposed to be like. Or here's what I got from my religion that I was raised with what a woman is supposed to be like. Or here's what I got from my best friend down the street when I was a kid about what, I don't know, like what a relationship was supposed to be like, or what a friendship was supposed to be like, or this is the message that I heard in my neighborhood growing up about what people that looked like me, what they were capable of, or how much money they could make, or these things. And so starting to examine, hey, wait a minute, like, where did I get this limiting belief from? Or maybe not even limiting, where did I just get this belief from in general? And is this something that I subscribe to? And now when we're going through as adults, going through and examining things, then it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, we're going about this consciously now. Like, yeah, I don't, as a guy, like, I don't want this kind of role. Like, I'm not going to subscribe to this anymore. And people were talking about kind of the whole MGTOW movement on here. And to me, I don't know. I think when groups start, there, I don't know. There's a lot of controversy with that, but I think kind of at the core with questioning kind of roles, like as a guy, what do you want to be a part of, and all of that. I'm a big fan of just question everything. Just question everything. That's what sets a person free. It's questioning everything and making up your own mind, and of course too, not letting a group dictate your belief system. Like, you deciding like what you believe and kind of what you want out of this life. Yeah, Narc Wellness says, I used to call my covert narc husband a robot, and I would tell him he wasn't human. Before I knew about narcissists, I always knew something was wrong with him. That's really interesting. One of the nicknames that I had for a guy who I now see was very narcissistic and a total crazy maker. I dated this guy when I was back in high school. I used to refer to him as Data, the robot from Star Trek, because that's how he was. He was very logical, and he just did not understand human emotion. And I was continually having to explain things to him about like what was appropriate and what was inappropriate. Not just with his own kind of squirrely behavior, because that was just flat out manipulative, but like other people's behavior. Like, he just didn't seem to get it. So yeah, robot stuff that's it. Just emotionally unavailable, emotionally clueless. Cole says, when I found out about the cheating today, it was like a knife in the heart. I started to panic that I was being left. What the bleep is wrong with me? Oh, Cole. I think it's one of those things. It's, you're a normal human being. I think there would be something wrong with you if you weren't panicked and if you weren't feeling like you had a knife in your heart. To me, that sounds like a very normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. So it takes time. I mean, getting a shock like that, it's a lot of times it feels like being thrown into a tub full of ice water. It's that feeling of like, wow, just shock and overwhelm. But that's normal. And it does pass with time. So please try to be kind and be good to yourself right now, because it's a lot. It's a big life-changing thing to find out about. Scott, that's interesting. Yeah, Jenny, I agree completely. Scott says, Dana, what if a narcissist had a choice? Would they choose between 1, a vending machine type device that could supply all of the narcissistic supply they desire, or 2, supply from a real person? And then Jenny was saying that oftentimes it's the power of actually hurting other people and of the power. And that's exactly what it is. It's for a lot of them, especially the ones that are sadistic, they enjoy inflicting pain, and they enjoy hurting other people, and it's all about power and control. So you wouldn't, if a person has that kind of mindset, then there wouldn't be much of a thrill to having power and control over a vending machine. It's kind of would be, it's, I think a lot of times too, in every narcissistic person, every abusive person, that kind of stuff comes out in different ways. And so with like bullies, for example, like the real kind of bullying type narcissists out there, they tend to target people that have weaknesses similar to their own. So it's like perceived weaknesses. So it's kind of the stereotype, right? Like you get this kid's getting bullied by, let's say, his dad at home, and then he goes to school and then he does the exact same stuff, like bullying and pushing around and name calling and all this other stuff to this kid at school. And it's kind of his way, since he has no power and control at home, then he's trying to get power and control in other ways, and he's taking it all out on the one person that he can, which is this other kid. So it can be very similar with like abusive relationships, how they tend to pick people that are that they can gain and keep power and control over, and then they kind of systematically go about destroying them. Happy, normal, well-adjusted people don't go around destroying other people. Like this is why it's not you. Like it's not you, it's them. And that's why a vending machine full of narcissistic supply there wouldn't be any appeal for that. Interesting question though. Yes, Narc Wellness is saying, yes, I always told him talking to him was like talking to a brick wall. Yes, and that is absolutely crazy making. That level of you can't get an answer, you can't get an honest answer. It's like pulling teeth to get some sort of clarity as to like what happened, or they just clam up. It's not really silent treatment. It's like as productive as arguing with a brick wall. Like it just doesn't go anywhere. There's no accountability. They're blaming everybody. A good example of that is that Daddy of Five channel. Like that channel is full of great examples of both abuse and Stockholm syndrome and lies. Their response to their videos was just absolutely outrageous. I don't know if I would say go watch it. It can be incredibly triggering. Like I said, I was up the other night in the middle of the night, like reporting all of their videos. I was so angry. So I was up for quite a while. Like ridiculous. Interested says, Dana, I loved what you just said about, where did it go? Happy people don't go about destroying others. What do we do about the flying monkeys who can't see this? This is really difficult because a flying monkey is a person who's been manipulated by a manipulative person. And if a person hasn't gone through narcissistic abuse, they cannot even begin to fathom like the level of manipulation. Most people tend to think that they can spot an abusive person or that they can spot a manipulative person. And most people are wrong. So especially if they've never been through a relationship with a narcissist or a sociopath. So including therapists, like they can really do a great job at just charming everybody. And my guess would be that they get a special amount of satisfaction from duping a therapist and a judge and people that are in positions of power and control. So it's really difficult to get through to a flying monkey. I think that the best way to get through to a flying monkey is to not challenge their perception of reality straight out. So Meaning, I would plant the seed and say something like, because it can make you look petty. So if a narcissist has already planted the seeds of like, you're bitter, you're angry, you're jealous, you're the problem, you're the abusive one, realize that's what the manipulative person has been led to believe. And so knowing that, walking in, if you can approach it from the opposite of like, I know you probably heard that I was, who knows, that I was abusive or manipulative or a liar or a cheater or all of these things. And I'm not here to get you to change your mind. Like, I realize that, so-and-so has already talked to you. All I'm asking you to do is to realize that there's two sides to everything and that my side is very different. And just pay attention to the actions that you see, not what they tell you. Like, and try to do damage control that way. And then come across as just very down to earth. Because generally a person, they start to see the truth with time. Because manipulative people tend to go from partner to partner to partner to partner. And their behavior tends to be dramatic, erratic, emotional, very immature. And to most normal people, they start to catch on pretty quickly of like, I think that actually is that person's the problem. So I would encourage people, reputation can be damaged. We don't have control over our reputation. We do have control over our character. So I would try to really kind of just, I know it can be hard when there's that whole smear campaign going on, but to try to tune out what everybody else thinks about you and instead worry about kind of what you think about you and worry about your own actions and make sure that you're acting in a way that you feel is in alignment with your character. And then over time, people will see enough of your actions to be like, okay, this person actually, they do what they say they're going to do. They're on the level. They're like consistently, a nice person or a good person or trying to do the right thing. Whereas this other person tends to run really hot and cold and, like problematic. So just try to let your actions speak for themselves. And if you're ever in a situation where you're trying to, you don't need to prove your worth to other people. I know that can be hard, especially if it's the flying monkeys or like family. But if people know you, then they should know you. And it's not worth your time or energy to try to convince other people that you're a decent human being. I think at that point, it's time to find some other friends or a better support system. Okay. Good night, Jenny. It was great seeing you here. I'll see you in the group tomorrow. The sound wave of silence. I did not see your question. Can you copy and repost it? Mama Cellabella. That's a cute name, and that's fun to say. Mama Cellabella says the grandparents are also abusive from a distance with the daughter. They don't call or have anything to do with her. Should my daughter still send a birthday card? No. Nope. And I would let your daughter know why. So I would try to turn this experience into a learning lesson. And really, this is my 2 cents, I could argue a case for it either way, I guess. But I would say, you know what, honey, the reason that we're not sending a card is because, they've been incredibly abusive and it's not okay for people to treat us like this. And so it doesn't matter if they're family. It doesn't matter if they're friends, that we're not going to be, we're not going to tolerate being treated like this. So to just set the standard of it doesn't matter if a person's family or whatever, abuse is abuse. It's not okay. It's not welcome in our home. We don't go out of our way to befriend abusive people. Like this is the a sign, when people are dangerous or destructive, we need to distance ourselves from them, not try to like befriend them. That would be one way you could approach it. If you really do want to send the card, you could also say something similar of, these people are abusive. We're going to keep our distance. We're having like low contact with them. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. You can either go no contact or you can go low contact. And low contact is exactly that. It's very minimal contact. So it might be birthday cards. It might be a phone call a few times a year. Just kind of whatever works best for your situation. And then if you go low contact, also letting your daughter know it's not okay for us to be, to be abused or to put up with this kind of stuff from family, from friends, from anybody. It's not okay. These are our boundaries, and it's okay to distance yourself to a place where you can stay safe and sane. And then having that conversation and then saying, so instead of spending 3 days at their house, we're going to send them a card because this is our way of, still having somewhat communication with them, but keeping them at a distance. So it's, kind of however you feel that you want to approach that within your family. Hey, Tanitria. Welcome back. Okay, so I just missed the question again. Hold on. Sound wave of silence had a question. The situation of upcoming divorce and child custody. Frankie, okay, I see your question now, Soundwave. Frankie, real quick, says, hi, Dana, I have this urge. I want to contact the third wife to apologize. I am the fourth wife, but after I put the timeline together, realizing he was cheating on me while married to her, should I do that? I think this is back to you, and I think the baseline for all of our decisions is trying to figure out, is this going to put you in a place, is this a threat to your safety or sanity? Is this going to be a trigger for you? Are you able to reopen or have limited contact with her, and, or is this going to open up a bunch of other stuff for you? So I don't know if there's necessarily like a right or wrong answer outside of where is your line with keeping yourself safe and sane. If you want to try to open up contact and apologize, I would definitely do so with kind of having no expectation, because again, she's also been manipulated by him. So who knows what he had told her about you, and vice versa, right? So I guess I would have no expectations with that. And I mean, you could. It's totally up to you. But no expectations is something I definitely would go in with, because if she's really bitter or attacking or wants to start, talking all about the past again, is that going to be worth it? And is that going to put kind of what's the impact going to be on your healing if that happens? So just some things to consider. Okay, Soundwave says, what is the true best way to approach your attorney about your partner's toxic behaviors? How do you make the gravity of the abuse or situation clear, especially with kids involved, and not come off as crazy? So I would try to find an attorney that's familiar with abuse. And I would preface it with exactly what you just said. I have a partner who is incredibly abusive, and I am concerned. I really want to make sure that I'm expressing the severity and the gravity of this situation to you, because I know if a person's not in it, that it can seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion, or that I'm being petty, or that I'm being, like this bitter, jaded ex-wife, and that's not the situation at all. And this is just only part of some of the stuff that I've gone through. And in finding a good attorney can be a lot like finding a good professional in any field, whether it's a therapist, or a doctor, or a gardener, or kind of you name it. So sometimes it can take going through a few of them to see if they're a good fit. Most attorneys have, kind of that free consultation. It would be during that time that I would ask them, are you familiar with abusive partners? If you're talking to a divorce attorney, my guess is they deal with this kind of stuff all the time. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily familiar with abuse, and it doesn't mean that you're going to have a good rapport with them. So that's something else to keep in mind too when you're looking for an attorney is, do you have that connection with them? And because that's important. Just like it's important to have with a therapist or a doctor or anybody else. Yes. So somebody who's always learning says, I guess you're talking to me. Like, I don't know. I missed part of it. How can we mail you stuff? You can email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse if you're talking about like emailing me. I don't know if you were talking about me or somebody else. The crazy, angry codependent asks, Dana, can a life coach help with victims of narcissists and sociopaths? Help with healing, I mean. Yes, I think the biggest thing is a person has to actually be familiar with abuse. So if you find a life coach or a therapist that's actually familiar with abuse and healing from abuse, then yes, they should be helpful. The challenge is finding people that are truly familiar with the dynamics of abuse. A lot of therapists out there think that they're familiar with abuse and they are not. And that's really, really problematic. Really problematic. So, because that happens, this is why this is my biggest challenge and frustration with individual therapy or even individual life coaching is if they're traumatized, right? And you're trying to get feedback and insight. If you're doing it one-on-one, you're limited to kind of the single point of failure, which is this other human being who may or may not even be familiar with abuse. So if you're trying to navigate your way out of the fog and they don't know what's going on either, y'all are both lost in the fog, wandering around. That was one of my big aha moments in therapy after this was like the second or third therapist I was seeing, and I'm like, I don't feel like we're getting anywhere. And it was the very clear feeling of like, I feel like I feel like I'm following Moses through the desert here. Like, do you know where we're going, or are we just going to keep wandering around? Because I don't want, like, I know change takes time and I know healing takes time, but like, how much time? Because I feel like we haven't done anything and it's been a while. Like, so I was just so frustrated with that. For me, what I have found that where a good fit for most people is joining a handful of support groups. So more than one. This way, different groups are going to be a good fit for different people and that kind of thing. Individual therapy, individual life coaching can be great. You can do those. You can kind of get the validation and clarity from hearing from like tens of thousands of other people in a support group, and then go and do the deep dive in individual kind of one-on-one stuff. And then you can also go back to the group and say, they said X, Y, and Z, and then see what the group says. Because they've been there, done that. To me, results and experience count so much more than a degree. Like an ocean of difference. Like, I want somebody who's actually knows how who's been through it and knows how to walk through hell, and how to get out of hell, to lead me through hell. Not so. It's sort of like the difference between studying, reading about how to do a marathon or how to run a marathon, and somebody who's actually run a marathon. Like, so. Okay, and Meredith, that's a great point. So Meredith says, my CODA group has been detrimental in my healing. So that's interesting, and I would not have expected that. And this is why I encourage people to join a few, because of that. Because I think the more people that are kind of giving feedback and support, the more kind of checks and balances are in place that you can kind of see, okay, is this valid? How is this resonating with me? Is it just me, or kind of what's going on? The Crazy Angry Codependent asks, what is CODA? CODA is a Codependence Anonymous group, and it's started, and they're free. They're all over the globe, and they are for kind of codependent, like recovering codependents. Those kinds of groups, I will say, for a person to get into possibly right out of the gate, it's going to be it. My guess would be it would be too much too soon. So, because really, again, kind of my experience has been, and working with a lot of other people, when a person is first out of this, that they're still in the fog, and they need validation, they need support. There's a lot of shame, there's a lot of embarrassment, there's a lot of confusion, and that they kind of need to be led out of the fog kind of somewhat gradually. It's an intense thing to realize what a person, I mean, you guys know, like, to realize what you've been in. So kind of guiding them out of that. CODA groups tend to be for people oftentimes that have been out of different types of kind of codependent, kind of overgiver, overtaker type dynamics. And they can really be, all about radical accountability. Well, for a person who's fresh out of an abusive relationship, where they're like, hey, wait a minute, I didn't see what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I was manipulated. Like, this isn't my fault. Had I known that this person had a pathological personality, I wouldn't have gotten involved with them. So it can feel incredibly re-victimizing, and it can be incredibly re-victimizing when somebody is trying to talk all about like you and your part in things, and you're like, hey, had I known the guy was or the gal or whoever was a pathological liar, I would have been out of there a long time ago. So, yeah, it's finding the right therapist and the life coach, and all of your whole treatment team can be a challenge. So, but it's a challenge. Hey, Kevin's here. Welcome. And Teresa and Marie and 100 Smiles, which has the cutest picture ever. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Vivian says, sharing experiences with like-minded people makes you realize you're not alone, and maybe not crazy either, as a narcissist wants you to believe. It's the first step in healing, in my opinion. I agree completely. Montana Cowboy says, Dana, what is the correct way to respond to someone who defends sexual betrayal in a monogamous relationship, indicating people are not monogamous? Get over it. You're just overreacting. I think when you see a person's behavior, so what you're seeing there is a complete lack of accountability. I think realizing that they're not motivated to change. Like, if they're not only not remorseful, they're not empathetic, they're not accountable, they don't care. Like that's a problem. So to me, there wouldn't really be much of a response other than filing divorce papers at that point. So, I don't know. Like, what else do you do in that situation with a person that has no accountability? You can talk, you can try talking and getting them to see your side of things. They won't. It's part of their personality. It's all about them all of the time. No accountability, no empathy, no remorse. It's whatever they want. And they don't have a problem with their behavior. They have a problem that we have a problem with their behavior. So that's not workable. It's the whole, in order for there to be a relationship. So there's the difference between a relationship and a manipulationship. So like a relationship, it's based on open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. It's that desire to work as a team. A manipulationship, it's a one-sided dynamic, not a team. It's a one-sided dynamic. There's not open communication. There's closed communication. There's not honest communication. It's manipulation. It's lies. There's not sincere communication. Again, it's manipulation. It's all about them and getting their needs met. It's not solutions oriented. It's all about them winning. So it's really important to make that distinction of what's going on here. And because if a person cheats in a relationship, then the appropriate response is, I am incredibly sorry. This happened. It won't happen again. Like, here is my empathy. I realize that it's caused tremendous damage in our relationship. I realize that these are my actions and that they were incredibly hurtful. There's empathy. There's remorse. This won't happen again. I am so sorry. There's solutions-oriented communication. There's that desire to reestablish trust. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm willing to live a life of total transparency. I'm willing, you can check my phone. I understand that you're not going to trust me for years, if ever, again. And I'm willing to eat dirt in order to rebuild our relationship because I messed things up. That's how a normal, reasonable person would respond to having an affair. If a person's not responding like that, if they're defensive, if they're, you're having to pull the truth out of them, they're not sorry. If they're not sorry, then odds are it's going to keep happening. Dragana says, I was not in a support group for a long time because I was afraid of narcissists fishing for victims there. So I just observed forums and YouTube. And so, yes, and actually, real quick, let me hop to this. Kaylin says, my narcissist said all of those things about being remorseful, but he still did it. Mine did too. Mine even went so far as to say, I will earn your trust back. I will do what I need to do. But the more here's the thing. If somebody cheats on you, it's a really good idea to go talk to that other person that they cheated with. That's when you see what they really have been up to when they think you'll never find out. And that's when you see a person's true colors. And that's thankfully what I was able to do. I was able to talk to his wife, who I didn't even think was still in the picture, to talk to her. We began talking. And then everything was crystal clear, and it made it very clear that this guy was just all talk. It was all talk. So, and then of course she's sitting here telling me this is like the third time he'd upped and left her out of the clear blue in 10 years. And, just that's when I realized, I'm like, oh my God, this is like so far, this is so not the person that I thought he was. This is not what I signed up for. Like, forget it. I am out the door. Like, I was not in love with him. Like, that guy is a jerk. I was in love with the guy that he pretended to be. And who wouldn't be? Like, the guy he pretended to be was awesome. Like, the guy that he really was a freaking loser. Okay. So, okay, Dragana was saying about support groups, and problematic, like abusive people fishing for victims there. That is a thing. It does happen. And so this goes back to learning to reestablish trust within yourself. So there are problematic people out there. Like we were talking about at the beginning of the live stream. Let's just say this is, and it's probably estimating high, but let's just say 25% of the population is problematic. Normally, it's probably closer to like 10, frankly. But let's say, well, let's just say 10. That makes me feel better. Let's say 10. 10% of the population is problematic. Well, how do you tell the difference between, is this person like abusive and has like this pathological personality, or are they not? Like, how do you tell the difference between like a sincerely good person and like a wolf in sheep's clothing? And a lot of it's just time. It takes time, and it takes paying attention to your judgment and you regaining power and control. Like you holding on to your power and control and not letting anybody else move you at a pace that you're not okay with. So if you're in a support group, and this is something I highly recommend, if somebody, here's some signs that something's off. If somebody like messages you out of the blue, kind of a weird thing, not necessarily problematic, but in time reveals really everything you need to know. So somebody potentially sending you a private message, somebody complimenting you. Oh, you're so beautiful. You're so sexy. Especially if it's, if you're a woman and you're interested in men, if a guy is messaging you, or if you're a guy and a woman's messaging you, or if somebody knows that you're gay, if it's the same, if it feels like something's off, right? Like if they're trying to kind of make this into a relationship, you're so attractive, I would never hurt you like that. That's inappropriate, right? If they, if they're wanting money, if they're wanting to meet up, if they're wanting to talk, if they're wanting to do something that you're not comfortable doing. So let's just say, for example, you are comfortable with talking to them. Well, that's okay. That might be okay. If you feel okay with that, then that's okay. If you feel like boy, I don't really want to, but I guess they really need somebody, and I know how that feels, so I'll be there for them. And then you're on the phone with them for like an hour or what have you, and then you kind of realize, this is too draining, or this person, I'm kind of feeling like a weird, like they're kind of flirty or something's off. Goes back to you maintaining the speed. So then you can kind of pull back and be like, you know what, I've really got to go now. Kind of thanks, but no thanks. Just starting to distance yourself whatever way you feel comfortable doing. If you're in a support group, letting an admin in the group know what's going on. So we post, we're every single day, like trying to let people know, here's kind of what to expect. We can only protect people so much, and what we try to do is more prepare them. So like, let's discuss all of this. I don't want to shelter you guys so much, because it is the real world and it's the internet, and anybody can pretend to be anything on the internet. So setting people up to win is like more of a long-term thing, because then you can take that skill set with you versus us just kind of keeping you in a bubble. So I can see, a person's hesitation with joining a support group or what have you, but you are in control, and you get to say what pace things go at. And it's okay. Like, it's okay to decide to be like, I'm just going to pull things way back for no reason at all, just because you're not comfortable. You don't even have to have an off feeling. Like, if you're just feeling uncomfortable, then that's reason enough. And I would encourage you to try to, people get caught up in this, and I did too, where they're like, okay, well, maybe this person's, are they a narcissist? Are they a codependent? Like, who are they? I don't know. All I know is it's kind of feels problematic. All you need to know is that it feels problematic. That's it. Like, that's it. A person doesn't have to have, a personality disorder in order to not be right for you. Like, being slightly problematic is problematic enough. Well, that's a great point. Guy and Jackie says, forget the internet. People can pretend to be anything in the real world. Exactly. Exactly. And, you go slow, you pay attention, you watch their actions. Do their words and actions line up? How are you feeling? Are you setting the pace? Yep. It's what Interested says, what I feel counts. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Yes, 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 yes. And so if you're, I would love, my goal is for you guys to get to the place where you could be in a whole room full of therapists and attorneys and narcissists, and everybody in there is saying, oh, you know what? Your judgment of the situation is wrong. And you being okay with saying, I'm pretty I feel like something's off. I'm not okay with that. And being able to trust your judgment about things enough to where that's okay. They can have their opinion, but you can have yours, and your life is not a democracy. Other people don't get to vote. If something feels off to you, then it's off to you. Because if you look through time, where how many things did people get involved in that were horrific, that were seen as normal? The Holocaust, slavery. It's really important that we could be in a position where everybody around us is no, this is completely normal and appropriate. We're going to just, participate in slavery, or we're going to, genocide, or doing these terrible things to people. It's important enough that we follow our own guiding star, that we don't get knocked off track by what other people around us are saying or thinking, that we have a solid moral compass of what's right or wrong. So that's why going for normal is a terrible gauge. Normal is just different degrees of messed up. Aim for healthy. That's the goal to shoot for. Aim for healthy, because normal has been the cause of slavery and the Holocaust and all kinds of atrocities throughout history. Guy and Jackie says, Dana, do you think I'm odd? I'm actually afraid to join Facebook because all I see and smell from it is trouble. No, I don't think you're odd. I think it depends on why a person's on Facebook. And, the challenge too, the added challenge with Facebook is it can be very easy to compare our internal environment with somebody's external environment. Because what you're seeing there, it's a person's highest and best reality. It's their edited version of their reality. You're seeing their highlight reel. And then, then here we are, we're eating cold oatmeal for breakfast, and we're late to work, and we've stepped in dog poop, and the reality, the day to day. And there they are on, vacation with their, amazing, handsome husband and darling children, and they're in the south of France, right? And you're sitting here F my life. So it can really make a person feel bad if you're going through and seeing all these happy people living these amazing lives, if you're taking all of that seriously. Because it's people's highlight reel, which may or may not be accurate. Facebook can be really hard, especially if a person's getting out of an abusive relationship, to see all these people in their highlight reels. That can be really problematic and create a lot of anxiety and depression. So, it's important in life for all of us to run our own race and to not get distracted by what other people are doing. The added challenge with Facebook is flying monkeys, people that'll join and heckle, and kind of the whole abuse by proxy, where you're getting abused by friends and family and coworkers and who knows who else of this abusive person. If Facebook seems problematic for you, but you want to be on to join support groups or what have you, I highly recommend creating a fake profile under a totally fake name. And then that way, and then not befriending a bunch of people that somebody else is going to connect and realize, oh, that's really, that Sharon, we know that Sharon, and because, here she's befriending all these same people. She thinks she's so clever. She just has this fake account. Like they'll be able to catch on to that pretty quickly if they're looking to harass you. So just have an account created for support groups. Oh, it's Marissa says, and there's always that annoying person airing their dirty relationship laundry. Yes. Or that annoying person that's airing all of their like amazing relationship laundry, right? They're like, my husband is the best husband in the whole wide world and blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, oh, geez. It's not even from a jealousy standpoint. It's just from like kind of that whole kind of, that Shakespearean, like, methinks thou doth protest too much kind of a thing. Like you're just kind of going above and beyond, talking about how amazing your husband is, which kind of makes me think maybe he's really not that amazing. You're trying to convince yourself because like if things are so amazing, people don't need to feel the need to continually say how amazing they are. Yeah. Ben saying, yes, Facebook is so much a highlight reel. Yes, it is. Yes, oversharing, totally oversharing. It's all of it. All of it. And I'm like the queen of oversharing. And I even think Facebook is oversharing. So it says a lot. Oh, it totally is. Scott says Facebook is the modern version of keeping up with the Joneses. Yes, it really is. And it's interesting. It's interesting from kind of like a people watching perspective. Like the pictures that people put of themselves on Facebook. And I was joking the other day with somebody like, what were we were going to call it something else, not Facebook. I don't remember. Like something along the lines of like, Get Real book. And it was just going to be like the reality instead of all of these, airbrushed, like supposedly, like, supposedly real pictures, like the real picture, in the morning, like my hair. I mean, I've got bangs again, curly hair with bangs. Like I look like Rod Stewart in the morning. My hair is really curly. It is not sexy. Like, taking real pictures and being like, yeah, 6 a.m. That's what it really looked like. It's not sexy, and just to make fun of it because it's so ridiculous how people put their highlight reel on there, or instead of putting all these amazing posts on there, like just putting the reality, like got to work 15 minutes late, hope nobody notices, kind of a thing, Yes. Oh, good. Guy and Jackie says, Dana, I never knew I was abused until I went to a support group and listened to all these people talk about their abuse. My doctor sent me. I looked around and I thought, now I get it. Yes. I love that. I hear that on average probably about once a week now, and it totally makes my heart smile on so many different levels. And especially when I'm hearing that like doctors and therapists and social workers and even people, domestic violence places, are seeing the benefit of ongoing support groups. And because that's where the aha moments come from. They really do. It's hearing from somebody else that's been there, done that. And so much of that is, there's all this shame. There's so much shame and guilt and remorse and regret that people tend to carry around, and getting into a support group and people being vulnerable and saying, this is what happened to me. When somebody else says that, it's just sort of like, oh my goodness, thank you. I'm so glad. Like, you too. Like, I'm not alone. It's huge. It's so powerful. And it can really just expedite somebody's healing. Dragana says, Dana, I look like an angry minion in the morning with purple hair. Sometimes I scare myself in the mirror. That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Some mornings can be pretty rough. Yeah, there is. There can be so much shame, especially when we just feel like we're so alone in this. I was, I don't know, probably 2 weeks ago. So I have ADD, and if you haven't guessed, and I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult, and I have the inattentive type. So not really a I'm pretty like a pretty mellow person, but inattentive, and to a point that it can be scary, like scary how much stuff I can just forget. And anyways, so I've been having issues with work. I mean, always, like my whole life, like with work and these kinds of things, and starting and stopping and forgetting, and just all of it. And I've came across a podcast on ADD that's run by a therapist, and then he has a group. And hearing from other people about ADD and like their life and their challenges, and it, even though like this is my field, right, and this is me, and I know a lot about ADD, hearing from other people and their experiences, I just wanted to cry, because so much of it, I thought it was more of like a character deficiency within me. Like, oh, I'm just not organized enough. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not, I'm not this, I'm not that. And getting so upset with myself, and then talking to other people and realizing, oh my gosh, they have like the exact same challenges as me. It was so eye-opening, and it was so great to hear from them, saying things like, well, Dana, okay, like getting pulled, one of the biggest challenges for me with the YouTube channel, my website, and the support groups and all of this has been because I struggle with kind of this terrible memory, and then like this struggling with attention, when my attention's having to shift between like 6 different things, it's so frustrating, because in it just never fails. Like I'll forget to get back to somebody with something, or like I'll forget and then I'll remember, and then I'll forget and then I'll remember, and then it's just been the most stressful thing out of all of this, is trying to like effectively keep up with everything. And I don't know, so trying to kind of come up with ways to stay organized, and I don't know, it's just, so yeah, support groups in general, for whatever it is you're going through, that's the point, is incredibly validating and helpful. Yeah, it is embarrassing. It's, I've heard of Trello. I've been thinking about doing that. I need to come up with some sort of system. I've been having, and David had mentioned he would help me with some website stuff, which I might take him up on. I'm having ongoing issues. It's so flipping frustrating. I have all these different email addresses. They should all be going to one inbox, and it seems like they're not, and I don't know why. And sometimes they do. Like sometimes I do get emails. I get enough emails from certain email addresses thinking it's not a problem. And then people are like, hey, did you get my one email? And I'm like, wait, what? No. And then I go into that specific email box, and there's like 20 other emails in there. I'm like, wait a minute. So yeah, just streamlining it all is something. Oh, well, thank you. Marie says, I love you guys and I love this group. I just thought I would say that. Well, thank you. Love all of you guys too. It's been so cool to, I feel like starting this group and starting this channel and everything, I feel like I've finally like meeting my people. like where have you guys been my whole life? And it's amazing how not only like the abusive people have so much in common, but how so many of us survivors of abuse have in common. And that's been really cool to be like, to just, you just find your people. Like, I love it. Yeah. And people are talking about different, like learning disabilities or possibly being on the autism spectrum or, kind of ADD or what have you. And kind of the pain that goes along with that and all of the hurtful things that people have heard over the years. Yeah, I think it's so important to realize and I know this might sound like overly PC, and I don't mean this to be overly PC. I'm saying this because I truly believe it. I think there's a lot of truth in people are like I don't think people are like disabled. I really do believe that people are like differently abled. Fully believe that. My brother has dyslexia. He was diagnosed fairly young age. He did not learn to read until probably like the 5th grade. But his skill set, because he didn't learn how to read, he became really great at like memorizing things. And he became really adept at, he's a really funny guy. Like he kind of developed these alternate ways of kind of getting through school and, kind of this whole different skill set. So, with me, with my ADD, my strong suit in that is I can hyper focus on something, like, and that can be problematic too, but I can get a lot done if I'm able to just sit and focus on something that I'm interested in. I'll stay at that for hours, days, weeks, or months. Like I can get really fixated on something, and that can be a really good thing. Shifting gears between different topics is not my thing. And so realizing I need to kind of pay attention to the environments that I'm in to where I'm not putting myself in a situation where it's not, it's not my strong suit. It's all about knowing yourself. And so, yeah, a lot of dyslexic people are incredibly brilliant and they do operate differently. Interestingly enough, my brother went to an alternative school. Oh, that kid went through it. I just feel so bad for him. He, this was back in like the 80s. This was back before, like the whole concept of dyslexia was just coming out. And, my dad was really upset about it and he was really taking it personally. Like my brother was like a reflection of him. And, there was kind of this stigma with it. And, they just didn't understand because I was the kid that I learned to read at a really young age. I learned to read before I learned to walk. So I was just like a fish to water when it came to reading and words and language and those kinds of things. And so they didn't understand like why my brother wasn't the same. Anyways, so he was in like, kind of resource room, special ed with kids that were, kind of profoundly cognitively impaired and was getting teased all the time. And anyways, my parents pulled him out and they put him in this special school. And interestingly enough, one of the things that seemed to help him the most was this technique. It's skywriting. And so with people that are dyslexic, it's something to do with kind of wiring or getting the different hemispheres of the brain to talk to each other. And so they would have him spell out words. So for example, if the word was like, I don't know, cup, right? So they would have him like put his arm out and then write like C and then U and then P. And doing this over and over and over again, within probably a year, there was maybe not even that long, like a tremendous improvement with kind of vocabulary and kind of connecting the hemispheres. It's just interesting. Um, oh, I agree. Transient Map says the mental health community of old had a lot to do with stigmatizing people. Yeah, there's still so much like stigmatizing language that goes on. Like for example, if we're coming across making the shift between like patient and client. So like the old mental health model was patient, that you were sick, like a doctor treats a patient. And that kind of went out after Sigmund Freud, because that was his whole belief, like everybody's just mentally sick. And then kind of the new wave, like kind of the I guess neo-Freudians, it was more of this concept of a dynamic of more of equals, like, no, you're my client. Like, we're going to kind of get through this together. We're going to explore this stuff together. And then making the shift between mental illness to mental health. And then also the concept of, so in a lot of like medical terms, it's the patient, and this bugs me so much. Patient is complaining of, like, patient is complaining of headache, insomnia, fatigue, these kinds of things. The word complaint has kind of that negative stigma. So I don't even use it. I just use the word report. Like, this is what they're reporting. Because complaint seems like, oh, this person's just whining about this. And that's not true. Like, they have valid issues. Like, they're here for a reason. So all just different kinds of little language like that is interesting to kind of examine. Because the language that we use shapes our perception of our environment. Like, it's powerful stuff. So, oh, Lucy, yes, I agree. Lucy says, therapists treat narcissists like they are insecure and depressed to explain their actions. Narcissists mean what they do and they are not insecure. I agree completely. And I was reading the book that we're reading for the book club, The In Sheep's Clothing. Fantastic. I cannot wait to discuss that book with you, because there's a couple different concepts, that being one of them, that I came across I loved the way that he described that and the way that he broke that down. And that really gave me a lot of aha moments and insights into how I approach this too, because I think I've been guilty of that as well. And that is definitely the approach of, at least where I work. It's this mentality that these are kind of, and a lot of them are, like, they have gone through trauma. So it's this idea of, okay, where they're kind of this baby bird with a broken wing. If we can somehow, like, heal this, then we can heal them. But, the needle doesn't move very far, if at all. And more often than not, it's just a bunch of people being manipulated is what it is. Kevin says, when is the book club, and is it the same time every week or month? In theory, there's the difference between theory and application. So the book club was normally going to be every Thursday, like 6:30. But I have decided to move and try to publish a book and possibly quit my job all at the same time, because I apparently like to really stress myself out. So book club is probably not going to happen until next month, until I get settled. I'm moving out Sunday. And then my book comes out May 19th. And I still have to, it's like almost done. Like, it's almost done, but it still needs a polish. I did print it out the other day, so that's a start. That's what I'll be doing this weekend after I finish moving. Scott says, my therapist never mentioned to me the possibility of my ex being a narcissist. Probably not a good therapist. Well, here's the thing though, with that. So most therapists out there don't make the connection to narcissists and abuse. Most people, narcissistic personality disorder, frankly, is not that commonly diagnosed. And I think it's because people are looking for more of like the Donald Trumps. Like that's a pretty slam dunk. Okay, this grandiose, check. Arrogant, egotistical, like check. Like he's such a caricature that it's so over the top that that's a pretty slam dunk textbook example. Like it doesn't get any more textbook than that. But the vast majority of narcissists out there don't come across like that. So he's a very extreme kind of over, like I said, over the top caricature of like what an overt narcissist is. Anything less than that, and I think this is going to change in the next like 5 to 10 years, but it's just kind of this understanding of, oh, abusive people are just abusive. They're not actually narcissistic, which I totally disagree with. Like the core of narcissistic abuse, the core of abuse in general is power and control. And that comes across in ways of generally abusing, using, exploiting, or neglecting another person to get your own needs met, which that is incredibly narcissistic. So it's this kind of, the way that I see it is, the way that it seems to me that most people understand this is that it's very compartmentalized. It's like, okay, this person is like, I don't know, like over here, like this person's a sociopath, and then this person's abusive, and then like there's all these traits that are kind of like existing like free-floating spheres, and it's like, no, they're not free-floating spheres. It's more of like a Venn diagram. Like there's a lot of intersection and overlap between these things. That's not taken into account. Yeah. So, oh, I agree completely. Scott says abuse is probably the core of most personality disorders, in my opinion. I completely agree. Trauma, to me, it's trauma. So like probably 90% of like mental illness and probably even physical illness, I would say the core is trauma. I think it's just a huge part of it. Outside of like, bacteria or viruses, I think a lot of it is trauma related. Yes, that's a great point too. Truth Seeker says you never see examples of covert narcissists on TV. No, you don't. You see like that guy from, the husband in like Sleeping with the Enemy. And if anything, when you do see covert narcissists on TV, we're sold the fairy tale. So when you kind of take a step back and you're like, well, wait a minute, like that's kind of messed up. Or even like overt, like, Beauty and the Beast. Like here's this kind of overtly problematic character. He's abusive. He's this beast. And what message are we sending kids, right? So there's this idea of, that your love can change, like literally change somebody. You can heal the beast within them. Just don't give up. Just take all their crap, and then given enough hope and love and understanding and patience, you can eventually someday down the line kind of remove that thorn in their paw or lift that curse, and they'll be healed. Toxic messages that we're teaching people at a young age. And romantic comedies, you see these crazy relationships where they're hopping in bed by like the first or second date, and then all of a sudden it's just this whirlwind romance, and everybody seems to be like portrayed as healthy, and everybody is like just like this like this whole big den of dysfunction going on, and everything works out in the end. And that's what everybody's taught. And that, of course, it doesn't work that way. So, just so twisted, sick and twisted. Yep. Teresa says, kids' TV and movies often paint the victim as the victimizer and vice versa. Yes. And that was a big part in this book for book club that we're reading, In Sheep's Clothing, where he talks about that. He's like, if you're seeing the victimizer as the victim, right there, you're seeing the situation backwards, and it's setting basically everybody up to fail. Like, it's really important that you see aggressive behavior for aggressive behavior and not as defensive behavior, which is traditional psychology. That's exactly what that is. Like, oh, well, this person's, acting out because of this trauma, and it's this, like, kind of their defense mechanism, which, Lucy, I'll be curious. We'll talk more about that, because I think I don't know if I agree with what he's saying 100%, but I think I agree with a lot of what he's saying. But, the concept of, this is just somehow their defense mechanism, and he was talking about in the book, like, well, it's, there's no defense mechanism there because they don't feel guilt or shame. It's more like they're trying to control our perceptions, which is very true. Interesting stuff. Oh, I agree completely. Teresa was saying, if you think of this biblically, you could take it a level further and say evil is disguising itself as good, and good is made to look evil. Completely. Yep. The more that I get into this, the more it's interesting, because you can go back and read. You see spiritual texts in like a different way, where you're like, oh, all of these passages about clarity and confusion and kind of the different words that people were using to describe concepts, like, or if maybe even, I was going to say metaphorically, but maybe even literally, I don't know, like kind of good or evil, it just starts making a lot more sense when you go through something like this. And I think there's a part in the Bible that says, God is not the author of confusion. So kind of, that is interesting. Like, confusion is generally manipulation. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there. Yep. Interesting stuff. She says, "Ooh, jinx, Dana." Yep. There's so much of that. Even if you just look at it kind of metaphorically, of God and the light, and kind of leading the way, and clarity, and you kind of your trust in this. And if you think of God even just in terms of like clarity, like we know when we're on the path, like like you're feeling it, you're feeling good, you're feeling calm, you're feeling clear. Even if you're scared to take those next few steps, you're still knowing that you're moving in the right direction. So, yeah, isn't that the truth? Ben says, evil never calls themselves evil. They see themselves as good. And they might not even necessarily see themselves as good, but they know that in order for evil to get its way, that they have to convince the rest of the world that it's good. And here's the other thing about that is people especially are rarely 100% bad or good. So, like Hitler, he helped bring about, a kind of like universal education for Germans. He helped bring about the highway system and the Volkswagen, and he did a lot of really great things. He also, the Holocaust. So it's hard for people. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I'm like, I really wish somebody would do a movie about World War II leading up to the concentration camps, because that to me, that is the story. But what most movies focus on is like the concentration, like Hitler circa 1943, like concentration camps to end of the war. Well, the war didn't start with the concentration camps, right? So the story really begins with, how did this happen? And I think it would be interesting to see people, how he was able to manipulate this many people on a mass level, and all of the cognitive dissonance that must have been going on in Germany at that time, with people looking around being like, how do we feel about this? How do we feel about having Jewish people wear gold stars and be on a registry, and then not being allowed to work, or having a curfew, or not allowed to have assets or possessions, and that kind of that slow descent, and all of the cognitive dissonance, all of the rationalization, all of the minimization, all of that. To me, that's the important part of history that we need to learn from, because that's how that stuff starts. And if it will keep happening if people don't see that this is how it starts. We all think we would never be a part of that, right? It's so easy to think we would never do that. We're so high and mighty, right? It's just they were awful people. It's so easy to think, oh, all of those German SS soldiers, they were just awful people. They weren't. They were normal people who got tangled up with a master manipulator. And so they target supply and they exploit vulnerabilities, and it can happen to anybody. It's so important. Yes, Arthur is talking about running your own race. Oh, it's so true. It's especially with healing. Well, I think with anything, actually. It's so easy to look around and feel less than. And, marketers are relying on that. Like, that's how they make money. Everybody should be something other than you are. Because, Lord forbid, like, if you actually love yourself, like, then you're a terrible customer, So you got to have a certain type of makeup, and you got to or have a certain type of clothes, or a car, or a job, or a house, or stuff. Everybody's got to be different. And it's got to change. Like, it's got to change every year and a half, or things go in and out of season, and all of this stuff. And it's just this constant planting these seeds of insecurity in people. And it's so easy for us to look around and think, well, I should be doing something other than I am. I should be further ahead. I should have more money in the bank. I should have so many kids, or I should be married, or I should be divorced, or I should, should. Like, we should all over ourselves. And instead of just being like, I'm just going to do me. Like, I'm going to do the best I can do and not look around. Sue, if you're not already in a support group, I highly recommend it. That is where I would start. Because that's a big answer. That's probably a long, ongoing kind of a thing. They're so manipulative. She was saying my malignant ex is manipulating my family, and they are believing him, and how do I handle this toxic situation? It just depends on the dynamic that you have with them too. So much of it is just letting them know he's highly manipulative. He's a compulsive liar. And, it sounds like you're believing him. It's just so infuriating when you're in these relationships, because other people they don't see it. Like, they don't see it, and they take other people at face value, and they want to believe in the goodness of him and all of this. And it's infuriating, and it can be like screaming into the wind. And this is why I would encourage you to get into a support group, because it can be like it's an ongoing thing. Yes. Okay. Montana Cowboy says, she said, I'm still having a hard time to completely believe that this covert narcissist I was with did everything to destroy me. It was like he wanted me to commit suicide. And sometimes they do. Sometimes that is their end goal. is to drive their partner to suicide. They can be that malignant and that vicious and that evil to try to destroy a person at that level. They push and they push and they push and they push. Just like that bully, you know, in school, that just, it's relentless. And it's just this pathological personality. So that wouldn't surprise me if he was trying to push you to suicide. I mean, it just goes to show, like, you're just not dealing with a person that's in the realm of like normal, decent behavior. It's just so far outside of the realm of like reasonable. So, oh my gosh, it's going on 3 hours. Mon says, that's something I don't get. How do they manage to make others believe that they are the good ones? I just don't get it. It's because it's words, right? It's words. And most people take other people at face value because they're honest, decent people. And honest, decent people expect to be believed, and they expect to be told the truth. Like, and that's the thing. With master manipulators, they lie so much. They lie when the truth would work better for them. And for normal, decent, we just don't think that way. So like, we don't, if somebody tells us that they're going to the gym and they're really, or that they're going to the grocery store, but instead they really go to the gym, like why would a person lie about that? Or if they tell us that they had this horrific childhood and they went through all of these things and blah, 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 we're probably going to believe them. And we're going to continue to believe them until we catch them in a lie. And even then, if they have an excuse for it, we're probably going to believe the excuse. Because we're projecting our goodness onto them. That's our mistake and our big lesson in this. But it's one of those things until you come, nobody's taught this stuff. So people go through life thinking, yeah, I treat others like I would want to be treated. I would want a second chance. If I say I'm sorry, I'd want somebody to forgive me. But the thing is, other people aren't necessarily like us. And that's where we get stuck. So it takes other people, like it took us, a long time to see, oh, this person's a pathological liar. And because they look at words. So when a person gets caught cheating and then they say, oh my gosh, I just, you were just so busy and you were never home and then they just say all this stuff. It's so easy to think that that's the truth. If they commit a crime and then they say all of the, frickin' Jack, when I was dating him, would sit there and cry about all of the terrible things he'd done in the military and, how he'd shot and killed people. And, he's so traumatized by this stuff. And here I am listening to him cry, holding him. And I don't think he was ever even in the military when all was said and done. Like, pathological liars. So, and that's part of it too. When a person gets out of these relationships, when you start realizing, oh my gosh, they lied about this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. It's like, not only are you trying to heal your heart, like a broken heart, but you're trying to make sense of what on earth happened, which entails going back to like day one of meeting them and then pulling everything apart and re-examining what was the truth, what was the lie, what was the manipulation, what was going on, and then trying to kind of stitch this Frankenstein version of like what happened into some sort of like cohesive narrative. And then generally pulling it apart again, because then you realize, oh, wait a minute, no, I think he also or she lied about this and this and this and this and this. And so the story keeps changing because it's all smoke and mirrors. It was all smoke and mirrors. That's the cornerstone of like a pathological personality, is none of it's real. And it just takes a while. Yep, Montana Cowboy says that's why I refer to it as a Twilight Zone episode. Yeah, I believe it. That's what it is. It's just you couldn't write it. Like these things are so wild. Like you couldn't even write, you couldn't even make this up. Like it's just, it's such, so over the top stuff. Yep. Yep. Vivian says, I think we tend to expect that people tell the truth, so we don't think of checking their story. I know I felt bad about being suspicious. Totally. And especially if a person's using like kind of guilt or shame, right? So if they say that they're divorced and then you find out, like, you hear from somebody else, no, actually, I'm pretty sure I think he's still married, right? And then you confront them and they're like, oh, I didn't want to tell you. We're almost filing, but like we're in separate rooms, but we're under the same roof. And, she's getting over cancer, and I didn't want to leave her because I still love her, but where I'm not in love with her. And, it's so easy to get manipulated with kind of like that guilt or that sympathy or what have you. And then again, like continue to just take a person at face value. Just not even think like, why would somebody lie about that? It's hard. And it's, Marie says, I heard that story. Yep, me too. And because it's not taught, it's sort of like you got to kind of pay the tuition of the school of hard knocks and go through it a couple of times to really get it and to really be like, oh, right, I really, really, really need to just have and not be paranoid, but have like a healthy dose of skepticism. Like, I know 10% of people out there are dangerous and destructive. Which one is this person? Are they one of the 90% that are safe? Or are they one of the 10%? Time will tell. I'm going to take things slow. I'm going to have a healthy dose of skepticism. I'm going to realize that trust is something that's earned. It's not something that's blindly given. And I'm going to go at a pace that I'm comfortable with. I don't care what my friends and family say. I don't care what my therapist says. I don't care what anybody else says. I'm going to go at a pace that I'm comfortable with. And I'm not going to just be so quick to assume that this person's a decent person. Time will show me. Time will show you everything that you need to see. It really, really will. So, okay, guys. On that note, I've got to get going. I got to get to bed. But thank you so much for being here. And, there's so many great questions. I got to get going. But real quick, Jane, let's just talk about this real quick. Dana says, Dana, is it odd that I'm actually not angry at the narcissist, but I'm more upset with myself for being so gullible? Yeah, that's normal. I think the anger will come. The anger will come. I struggled with that. I was really upset. I felt so stupid. There's a lot of shame and feelings of stupidness and embarrassment for getting tangled up in these relationships. It's very normal, and it's not your fault. I mean, my God, like you weren't gullible. I mean, you were an honest, decent person who thought you were dealing with another honest, decent person. Most of us have gone through life. I mean, most people that are here, they get tangled up with this person, and they're not young. They're not like 16. I mean, sometimes you can date a handful of people and you don't encounter a problematic one. But because this stuff isn't taught and it's not discussed, and there's all this shame and embarrassment, and people, like I said, don't really discuss it, then this stuff, like, it thrives in darkness, and it thrives in confusion and all of that. So it's understandable that you would feel that way. But It's not, it's just, hindsight is always 2020 with everything, with people that we date, with friendships that we have, with businesses that we start, with jobs that we take, with career paths that we follow, with friends that we make, with like food that we eat, with hobbies that we take up, with places we move, all of it. Like hindsight's always 2020, always. And then when you have the clarity to something, it seems like so flipping obvious. And that's the downside of that clarity, is it's just like, oh my gosh, of course, like why didn't I think of this before? But it's not beating yourself up about it. Like all any of us can do, the best we can do at the time, when we know better, we do better. That's it. That's it. And it's life. That's it. That's what life is about. It's about growth. It's about moving forward. Yeah. And being your own best friend and just being kind to yourself. It's so huge. So huge. Yeah, I like that, Kevin. He says, the more you chase your dreams, the further from your past you'll be. Yeah. So, moving forward, we were talking kind of some biblical stuff earlier. And, there's one of my favorite sayings in the Bible is, where there is no vision, people perish. And I think there's so much wisdom in that. It's so important for people to have a vision, because if they don't, then they're the walking dead. There is nothing. They're just existing. They're in a holding pattern. It's so important, I think, for us to thrive, to set our intention of, this is my vision. This is where I want to go. I might not know how to get there. I might not know where to even begin. I might not even really think it's possible. Setting a vision. This is what I want. I want to thrive. I want to be happy. I want to have joy. I want to reclaim my power and my control. And then you start taking those little tiny steps every single day. It's all about reclaiming your power and control every single step of the way. Like every single moment of every single day. Even doing things like going into the bathroom mirror and you're having a down day, being like, no, damn it. Like, I am not going to let this steal my joy. And you make it a point to just smile in the mirror. You might not even feel it, but it's digging your heels in and being like, you know what? No more. Like, I am in control here. Not saying that you can't feel what you feel, but just even those little moments of, I might still be really depressed and overwhelmed, but I'm still, like, right now, I'm reclaiming my joy, and I'm going to find some joy. Like, I'm going to be thankful and grateful for the weather outside right now, or that it's a blue sky, or even that it's a rainy day and I can stay inside and read a book. Kind of whatever. Thankful for the health that you do have. And not letting that necessarily minimize what's going on, but realize that these things can coexist at the same time. Like, you can have, you can be grateful for things in your life and you can still have struggles in your life. These things can coexist. It doesn't have to be one or the other. They can coexist. So, okay, guys, I have got to get to bed. Thank you so much for being here this week and helping me celebrate my 2-year YouTube journey. That's super exciting. And yeah, so here's to working on year 3. That's so exciting. So you guys have a fantastic night. I will see you next week. Just lots of love to you guys as always. So you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay, bye.